There is no need for me to introduce anybody to anybody. You all have read the program, and Anahera is going to do a splendid job of telling us what we are listening to next.
Kei taku iti, kei taku rahi, he kupu mihi e nei ki a koutou katoa, kua whakaroi ka mai nei I tēnei ahi or who have been here for the entire duration. Thank you so much. Ko he uri ahau no Ngāti Tukore here, ko Anahera Gildei tōku ingoa. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you this session, which I think follows on really wonderfully from the session that Mercia just had, since we're going to be talking really intensely about safe spaces in colonial time, I think. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Jacinta Ruru, who is a professor of law at the University of Otago, and was recently, and definitely at the time of the editing of this book, Ngā Kete Mātauranga, was the co-director of Ngā Kete Mātauranga, New Zealand's Mauri Centre of Research Excellence. She has done extensive research considering Indigenous people's rights, interests and responsibilities to own and care for lands and waters, amongst so many other things. The bio was so long. She's amazing. And she is one of the editors of this incredible book alongside Linda Waimarie Nikura. I'd also like to introduce, it is my great pleasure to introduce Maria Barge. She is a professor at Te Kawa Maui School, Te Herenga Waka, Te Herenga Waka, Victoria University of Wellington. So she has researched and published extensively in the areas of Māori politics, and I have been in her lectures, and they are outstanding. She also focuses on Indigenous resource management. She's on multiple governance boards and is currently on the Greater Wellington Regional Council Climate Committee. So I would like you guys, please, would you like to introduce yourself?
Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko horohoro te maunga, po kaitu te awa, ko Ngāti Kea, Ngāti Tuara, ngā tangata, ko Te Aroa te Waka tērā, ko anō Ngāti Awa hoki ahau. Tēnā rā koutou, he mihi mahana ki a koutou katoa.
O tēnā, tēnā koutou, ko Raukawa me Ngāti Ranganui ngā iwi, ko Paparamu me Wairoa ngā marae. Kia ora.
Kia ora. So I'm really honoured to be here and talking about something that's very dear to me, something that's very close to my heart, and that is not the microphone holding, but academia, the role that that academics have and have had in the interface of Western research institutions. And this book, which I'm sure you'll all have seen, and if you haven't, definitely you want to pop down the back and purchase. Is that right? Is that what I was saying? Ngā Kete Mātauranga is, honestly, if you haven't read it or haven't got it, it is one of the most important books, especially if you're doing any kind of research, and even if you're not. In this book is 24 Māori academics who are sharing their personal journeys, revealing what being Māori has meant for them in their work. And it is actually a call for action, and it's also really personal. There's a whole lot of all of the stories in here are really personal, and so for me, as also an academic, that's something that I've been able to really relate to. And it also means that, you know, when we read these kinds of stories as baby academics, which I am, we can feel validated and less likely to run like hell away from the university. So, without further ado, I'd like to just begin by asking Jacinta, as one of the editors, how this book came to fruition.
Yeah, so with Linda Nikora and I, who together we were leading Ngā Pai o Te Maramatanga, which is New Zealand's Māori Centre of Research Excellence, and we, in that role, were really privileged to know well Māori academics, Māori scholars from throughout the country, so all the universities, the wānanga, and so we became really closely involved in the experience of being Māori in a tertiary institution. And we wanted to, and also as part of that job, we're having these kind of crazy conversations with a lot of the university leaders, a lot of people who hold a lot of power in New Zealand. And in amongst all these conversations was a growing realisation and a growing interest in our mātauranga. And we had Dame Juliette Gerard as the Prime Minister's Chief Science Advisor come in late 2018 saying and recognising, that was the first time I think that a Chief Science Prime Minister's advisor would recognise in any way that there is real value in mātauranga for us as a country, and that we need to find ways to value that mātauranga right from the beginning in any of our research solutions for here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And of course, as Māori, we know that, but then when you go to some of the experts, as Māori, who are trying to desperately work in that interface, to bring mātauranga into their disciplines, there's an enormous amount of struggle. And so we wanted to publish a book like a book hadn't been published before, and we asked 24 Māori scholars to join this journey with us and to be incredibly brave. So we asked scholars from throughout the country. It's kind of the A to Z, and you'll see in the book at the front we've categorised everyone. So people have been trained from anthropology to zoology. So these are Māori who have fallen in love with their a curiosity to go on to do higher education and to be trained in a Pākehā discipline, I suppose. It could be so from anthropology, geology, physics, management, ecology, psychology, law, all of that is in this book here. And so we wanted them to be brave, to really share with us why they went into university, what motivated them to go to university, and what has been the experience of trying to bring in their mātauranga as part of their research solutions for Aotearoa, New Zealand. And so that was really the goal of the book. And when I say, I mean, the cover perhaps doesn't really give away what's inside, and if I just sort of briefly, so it was a really brave journey. We had to ask each of the authors to talk in first person, so you've got to remember these are, our Māori researchers are used to writing in a third person, very academic way. You know, this is very used to, writing our arguments in a trained, disciplined way. We wanted them to step outside of their disciplines and really be vulnerable, and be vulnerable to themselves, to their bosses, to their colleagues, and really talk about what it's like to be at the university. And with each of our authors, we employed an amazing photographer, and I'm looking at you, Patricia Grace. The photographer was Grant Maiden. He's the only Pākehā involved really in the kind of the making of this book. But he had been a beautiful photograph of you, Patricia, and that gave us a lot of confidence, and he came with really high credentials. And so he went around, he did an amazing job, and he went around and he sat with Māori scholars throughout the country, and there's just these most gorgeous photos, and if I can just sort of show you, now I'm going to flick to a page. There's Ocean Mercia having a cup of tea with her mum. There's who's an amazing physicist, trained in physics. I don't know. There's Danny Mātāmua, the superstar.
Maria's pictures are gorgeous. Yes, I was looking at them.
Maria's going to show hers, I'm sure. And Nepia, who's speaking earlier on this week. So it's just filled with so many of our scholars in many different places. And alongside Grant, we had an artist, a Maniapoto artist, Hirimahina Ikotoni, who did a beautiful piece of artwork for each of the authors. And that again helps to frame the work that's in here. It sits at the beginning of every page, and now I can't find an example. Is there one here? Oh, maybe that's not a very large one. But here she is trying to think about our mātauranga and physics sitting alongside there for Ocean.
And this is the artist, is that correct?
This is the artist.
Thank you. So, Maria, maybe from your perspective, it would be really interesting to know how that approach was and how you came to grapple with that first-person story writing.
Yes. So, it was a bit difficult.
Your face.
Yes, I'll put it further to my face. I was just saying earlier to Metiria as well that the audio bit was probably worse. There's something about saying it out loud, reading the text out loud, that wasn't quite as bad, just reading the text. But yeah, I mean, we are used to more third person or stories, but
Shall I jump in there? Because Maria's just mentioned the audiobook. So
Yes, I was going to say, what audiobook?
What audiobook? So the audiobook, we've put all the authors have now had to go into local studios sort of over COVID. It's been quite an enormous exercise. We think it's probably the first of an edited book of Indigenous scholars committing to the audiobook. So each of us have gone into studios and narrated our own chapters. It's been very emotional. Maria might want to talk a little bit more about that. And that book, the audiobook is being launched on the 5th of July. So, yeah, it's going to be very exciting.
If I just add, I mean, one of the difficult things I think is, in part, you know, when you're talking about a discipline, or, you know, the university and decolonising the university, it's sort of one step removed. But when you want to talk about, you know, the mix of what you saw when you arrived at university, or, you know, what you'd seen where you came from and those sorts of things, there's also the balancing of, I guess for me, one of the challenges was articulating how to balance saying that I still believe in the university, which I felt like you know, was going to be frowned upon, including by Rangi Mātamua, another session where he's gone on about universities being terrible places. And they are, you know, have all sorts of challenges, but also there's potential there, and a lot of hapu and iwi and whānau send their kids, and I see some of my former students here today, to university to learn particular sets of skills. They don't want them to miss out on all their, you know, Maori side of things, their mātauranga and their reo, but they want to acquire other sorts of skills at the university. And so, you know, communities, Maori communities, want there to be Maori academics, Maori within universities, but at the same time, some of them throw things at us, and you know, at the same time. So it's, for us, it's always the balance of trying to hold on to these different elements. And actually, to me, it's similar to, Jacinta's been involved in another project with Clear Charters and others, He Puapua, a report trying to realise the aspirations in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and they extended the diagram that we've seen in the Māteke Mai report with the two spheres of rangatiratanga and kāwanatanga. And in their report, they had a very tiny rangatiratanga sphere, and they said, you know, the kāwanatanga sphere's got a bit too big. We need to enlarge our rangatiratanga sphere. And again, it's the same sort of ensuring that we give as much energy to our hapu and iwi as we do to tangata tiriti and the kāwanatanga sphere.
In the introduction to your book, you say that at the time of publishing, which was 2020, that there were only 5% of academic staff at universities were Maori across the entire country, which to me was like actually quite shocking, even though I don't know why I didn't know that. But one of the things that it says in your introduction is that to look at the ways in which Mātauranga is positively transforming the tertiary space. Would that say that would be part of the vision of what you've done, and how do you think it's going?
Yeah, so just, so there is only 5% of Māori in tertiary education and in teaching. Many of them are in kind of the quite vulnerable positions in academia as well. They might have what we call soft contracts, so they're only in sort of for a contracted research position, or they might be in early career junior lecturing positions. So that 5%, you can start to unpack that very quickly, and that came on some other incredible work that some younger Māori and Pacifica scholars were writing. I don't know if you saw that work, is why isn't my professor Māori? Why isn't my professor Pacific peoples? You know, those are really key questions that need to be asked. And so this book is certainly a call for action. It's a call to attention to our university leaders that they have to change, and that the problem is not ours. So we would often be sitting in these, you know, conversations with vice chancellors and so on, and they'd say, well, you know, there's only 5% Māori because Māori have to keep doing more. You have to keep going and getting these PhDs and these master's degrees and publishing. And so it kept always being turned back to Māori just need to do more. And we wanted to really highlight that that was not what needed to happen, and that Māori are like superstars in academia. They're overachieving. Māori are coming through with incredible PhDs across many, many different disciplines, including in the sciences, and they're not getting employed. The problem is in the institutions and how the institutions are set up. And so it was really important that this book spoke to that.
Great. And I think that, Mario, you were saying there was a similar sort of percentage discussion about a 111 emergency. Perhaps you'd like to tell us about that.
Oh yeah, so I've started this other project inspired by Jacinta and Metiria and other people's research in the law faculties and the inclusion of tikanga and te reo to be taught to law students. And so I've been dragging that across to the political science departments and saying, well, hang on, if they're doing this over in law and you're talking about government and states and things, shouldn't you also be talking about tikanga as a first source of law in this country, and Māori political institutions as the first political institutions in this country? So I thought, okay, well, I'll start with a bit of a scan, because some people like having the numbers. So I thought, okay, I'll do a scan. So I scanned across had a couple of research assistants help me with this very manual labour, look across the different political science departments in universities across the country. That was a really quick scan, because there are only 3 Māori. So 1% of the academics in political science departments in the country are Māori. And then I thought, okay, well, they must be teaching some other stuff though. There's only those are the Māori academics, but what about the content? Scanned the course outlines, and again, there was only approximately 1% of the content of what's being taught in political science departments is about Māori stuff, including te tiriti. And then I thought, okay, well, what about the discipline? It has a journal, the New Zealand Political Science Journal. Let's have a look at that. Maybe it's got heaps of articles. And again, there was only about 1% of the articles in that journal since it began in the 1940s have been had Māori content and by Māori. So, 111, it is a bit of an emergency. And again, all of those, there's stuff being taught in Māori studies. I'm in a Māori studies department with Mike. There's a whole lot of Māori students also coming through law and political science, and they need to see representations of themselves, their own stories, and our own philosophers and political histories. And so that's a bit about that.
Kia ora. Jacinta, and so, that's really shocking to me that there's such a small percentage in those positions across universities. And at the same time, having been working in a university, I'm like, yeah, no, that makes total sense. I would have, anyway, close to running away myself sometimes. So I wondered if you guys would share with us, how you came to get to university, what took you there and into the subjects that you went into.
Yeah, so I often talk about, so I'm a professor of law. I often talk about falling into law, or even just falling into university study was by chance. So my whānau didn't go to university, left school, what would have been equivalent of about 4th form, 5th form. Dad's raukawa, brought up next door to Paparamu marae, his dad's marae, his mum's from Ngaiterangi, Ngāti Ranganui, Ormsby, whānau. So very much brought up in the Raukawa area there. My mum's Pākehā, brought up in New Plymouth. And I don't know why, but my dad was really attracted and moved away down to Te Waipounamu and down to the head of Lake Wakatipu, so Glenorchy. So I had a very rural upbringing in a very Pākehā environment. And around me and surrounded was 2 gateways to the national parks of Fiordland and Mount Aspiring. And often as a young child I felt a really deep unease of knowing that these places were of absolute importance to Ngāi Tahu. This is the centre of their economy, is where I'm living. And this is, and none of it being represented around me. So I was very curious, I suppose, as a child, but didn't come across any real content, Māori content, until 5th form English, and first read Patricia Grace and Whittier Maida's work. And that was just the change moment for me, the catalyst moment. I thought I was going off to be a journalist, make documentaries and so on. I don't know. Anyway, I went on to university, I did Māori studies, politics, And it wasn't until my third year of university study that I started into law degree. And I loved law, like I really loved studying law. It's an amazing puzzle of trying to, work things out. And I like that you can build an argument in law that has to be heard, that the courts, they should listen to it. They don't really listen to it much back then, and things are starting to change now, and I'm really hopeful for where law in Aotearoa New Zealand is going to. There is a strong recognition by some really important senior people, including Maori judges, that our first laws do count. They are part of our legal system. So, I fell into university study by chance, very much a chance encounter. And I stayed, and I never left.
Kia ora, Maria.
Well, my father's right here in the front row, Brian Barge, and I'm not sure where my mother, Robin, is, somewhere around. So they're picking someone up. She's doing her publishing workshop at the same time. So anyway, they're strong influences, and of course they were hippies when I was growing up. And Brian's scoffing at this behind his mask.
We can tell you're scoffing.
But they were also activists, and Brian's work testing water took us when we were little kids to Papua New Guinea. And I think, if you ever need sort of stark examples of environmental destruction in the shape of gold mines and so on, then you can see it. We can see it everywhere, but there was particularly stark. And Brian had also campaigned against a fertiliser factory down around Blenheim when we were kids. So there was a sort of long history of getting out and about onto the streets. My brother's gone into finance, so he's sort of gone in a different direction. He lives in Hong Kong. He won't be watching this, I can guarantee. Anyway, no, we're close family. And so Robin and my brother Kapua actually enrolled me in politics at university. I also did English literature because I loved the Bronte sisters and all of those sorts of classics, but I was a bit of a B student at that, and Te Reo. But politics was the thing that I somehow really clicked, even though there was an absence of Maori stories, but the sort of power dynamics and struggle for who gets what and when and why, that sort of element clicked with me. I guess I also had this strong sense of when things were just or unjust, and so that was a conundrum I wanted to figure out, I guess.
One of the things that I noticed while reading through the scholars who are in this book, quite a few of them did what they called divorcing their discipline and scampered back over to Māori studies. And I wonder, did that happen to either of you, and what and why, and what do you think's going on there?
Well, yeah, I've scampered back to, I'm in Te Kawamau Māori studies at Te Herenga Waka, Victoria University of Wellington. So my PhD's in politics and international relations, and then I did have a contract, in fact, at Vic in the politics department, but it was a short-term contract, it was temporary, and then a place came up, permanent position in Māori studies, and so I thought, I'll jump across there. I'd done Te Reo. In fact, Te Mihinga and Becky were at university at the same time as me, and really never looked back after that. I'd always felt a bit awkward in the politics department, like I was pretending a little bit, and that was because when I joined the department there was still an absence of Māori voices, and so I was looking at elections and trying to study, voter turnout, Māori voter turnout, and those sorts of things. But it still felt like something significant was missing, and I think the politics department still has an assumption of the superiority of states and a state system, and really a Western superiority complex. And much of what is taught still assumes that, states are the pinnacle of civilization, and a lot of the thinkers that they continue to teach, Hobbes and others, have said things like, where there is no arts and no letters, there is no society, where there is no state. And so that assumption really is at the basis of a lot of the thinking that goes on there. But of course, Māori politics is based on other sorts of relationships, kin relationships and kin-like relationships. So, I went across to Māori studies and didn't look back.
Yeah, so for me in law, for more than 20 years, often we talk about ourselves as being the lonely onlys, the lonely only Māori academic in your discipline. So for more than 20 years, I was the lonely only Māori academic in the discipline of law. That's really cruel and that's shocking. That's cruel for the whole discipline and our knowledge base and building up the arguments to be able to argue from a Māori way in law, and who are we training as the next generation of lawyers when students may occasionally come across a Māori lecturer if they are lucky. So that's shocking, the lonely only point of view. That has changed in about only in the last 18 months, and I now have two amazing Māori colleagues joining me, Mihiata Parini and Matidia Tude, and Matidia's here. So the long wait was worth it. But there were many times when I thought, of going over to Māori studies. Many who write in this book write about being lonely. So, for example, Marama Muru Lanning, an incredible anthropologist, Tainui anthropologist, wrote the Waikato Awa book. She writes about that hurt of being in anthropology department. She says in the anthropology department there was an absence of ho, or an absence of an ethic of generosity. And she says, I left the anthropology, this is how she opens her chapter, I left the anthropology department and at the time I felt a failure. That's absolutely shocking. You'll see that coming through again and again. Ocean Mercier, trained in physics, PhD in physics. She talks about the physics department not being very welcoming. You have Alice Te Somerville, who is trained in English to a very high level, saying that she wouldn't work in an English department here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. They've got a whole lot of decolonisation to do. It would not be safe for her to be there. And so the blunt fact, as we reasoned in going through these 24 stories, is that it is incredibly hard to be an academic in these departments. That was only one part of the book. Shall I jump into another part?
Go for it, please.
Because of course, the motivation and a really important part of was a call to action and was to really talk very openly about this experience, not to stay in that note of trauma in any way, but to cause a change. And so the book has 8 calls for action and shows very clearly how we can easily change the tertiary education system and why we should. But maybe before I go to those calls of action, I thought, so one audience was the university and decision makers and those who hold power, but really what was motivating Linda Nikora and I was 2 other primary purposes. One was really to acknowledge our ancestors as Māori, and our ancestors who have held that mātauranga for us today, the waves of Māori scholars who have tried to work at that interface, and many who have succeeded enormously in laying the pathway for us. So Aparana Ngata and so on. There was a huge wave of scholars that went through then. And so part of it was acknowledging them. Another wave that came after them was Ngāhuia Te Awa Kotuku from here, an amazing scholar that laid the pathway for what we can do today. Linda Tuhiwai Smith, Mason Jury. And so the book also was a real testament to what they were the real brave ones that were making those pathways for us all to succeed as Māori here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and to be really proud and hold on to our mātauranga. So that was one audience. And look, the other audience was, even though we're very critical of the universities and our disciplines, it was really to inspire Māori that you can dream to be whatever you want to be. If you want to be a zoologist, if you want to be a geologist, if you want to be an economics theorist, come, we are here and, we love what we are doing, and hold on to those dreams. And, we hope, this is about hoping that we're staying here to try to create a better institution so that the next generation of Māori coming through are going to have a much, much better experience, and they will thrive in any of the disciplines across the university that they choose to study. And hopefully they won't all be scampering to Māori studies. I don't know. Yeah, it's quite tenuous though. It's a hard place to be.
It is a hard place. And this is a really interesting time, in history, because there is a huge interest and resurgence in Mātauranga Mauri. There's a hunger for it, which is a little bit disturbing amongst Pākehā. And I wondered, Maria, if you would talk a little bit about Mātauranga in this book and what that means. It's a big question.
Oh, I had a different thought. When you said that, I thought, oh yes, there's the momentum.
Okay, kapai.
Yeah, so I was thinking of something about that. One of the things that we're discussing a lot in Māori studies is, because we have seen this huge increase in the numbers learning te reo, our different colleagues who are really keen and enthusiastic, want to know about Mātauranga Māori in their different disciplinary areas and so on. And we're still thinking, how can we continue to balance? We want to prioritise our Māori students, and in Māori studies courses there used to be a majority Māori students in those classes, and so you could naturally have certain kinds of conversations that if 80% of the class are not Māori, you can't have the same sorts of conversations. So particularly in te reo, where people have, well, not just particularly te reo, learning about te tiriti or Māori resource management, the history of our whenua, on both sides, Māori, Pākehā, Tauiwi, all have different emotional responses to what they're learning. That can be quite upsetting. And so we've been thinking, how can we continue to prioritise our Māori students in the context of so many other students as well, which we're enthusiastic about too. We think that's fantastic that they're keen, because there's this momentum is kind of growing. But to me, it also comes back out to how do we continue to give energy to our rangatiratanga side, if you like, our whānau hapu iwi, our Māori stuff and Mātauranga Māori, as well as kāwanatanga and tangata tiriti. And we've seen huge change in, in the kāwanatanga sphere. There's the Public Service Act 2020 now has, pointed out that the public service has to help uphold these Crown obligations to understand about Māori and engage with Māori and so on. So all the chief executives are very keen and alert to this idea, and they want to build capacity within the kāwanatanga sphere to understand Māori stuff. So there's only so many of us Māori people to teach these sorts of things. So we see experts that are working for hapua iwi or iwi organisations poached across basically to government, where they can pay quite a lot higher salaries. We've seen people from here in Rotorua dragged down to Wellington for jobs at Ministry for the Environment and other places. And so hapua and iwi with little money can't compete. So it's hard, but then they're doing great things within central government or local government. So how do we balance these things? I think those are real questions to mull over. And I think that's where our tangata tiriti come into play to support and back us up.
So delving really into that Mātauranga and the Ngā Kete Mātauranga, and you'll see in the book, and you've got like Meihana Jury in particular talking beautifully about our Mātauranga, but around our three baskets, and about Te Kete Aro Nui and that pursuit of knowledge and that real careful attention we pay to the environment and everything around us. And so thinking about our ancestral baskets of knowledge, and then thinking about how that interfaces with the Western English knowledge system is an important part of the book. And a part of the book too, I'm not sure if I've already said this, but Māori have been generously sharing our Mātauranga for more than 200 years, for anyone who's willing to listen, learn and know. And I was reminded as we were putting this book together, we went back to the Pākehā author Michael King, and 40 years ago, in the preface to Te Ao Huri Huri, he wrote, "For Pākehās with little previous contact with Māoritanga, new educational opportunities coupled with the establishment of institutions such as urban marae and Polynesian radio stations presents an opportunity to participate in what one writer has called a psychologically rich culture from which for 100 years Europeans have taken nothing but a few place names and a great deal of plunder." And so he wrote that book with incredible Māori scholars of the time. Te Ao Huri Huri is a really important book for us as a country. And I just feel that we have, I don't know, it just feels that we're always on this intellectual precipice and we haven't really moved any further. And I think by calling out those colonial institutions that they have to make way for Māori to be able to do Māori research in a way that makes sense to us is really important.
I think I'm aware that actually we're rushing into where we've got very little time, in fact, left. So I would love to hear the call to action, the 8 calls to action, please.
Okay.
And if you have questions, please prepare them.
Okay, so there's 8 calls for action, and they sit at the end. And so the first one is Mātauranga can transform our contemporary realities. And you've got Ngāi Tahu scholars like Sasha McMeeking speaking about, you know, the power, if we're given to reimagine, you know, we have the solutions within Mātauranga. So Mātauranga can transform contemporary realities, and we have to accept that and enable that at an accelerated rate. And I often talk about if we want to reverse biodiversity crisis that we're in, if we want to tackle climate change, we have to, as a country, enable Māori knowledge to be at the forefront of finding solutions. Number 2, our whānau matter. We are writing for our whānau, and that may be different to how our colleagues in our disciplines are writing and what's motivating them. So our whānau matter, and that whanaungatanga, as we know, is the glue that holds our Māori society together. So we're writing for our whanaunga, as like Sean Ogilvie talks about. He's writing for the Kiwi. The Kiwi is his whanaunga. And so that is motivating, you know, thinking in a whānau way, in a very broad Māori way. Number 3, present-day echoes of a colonial past is something that we're all struggling with. Tahu Kukutai, the amazing demographer, she writes, you know, the long drop in the newspaper wallpaper is no historical accident. That Nipia talks about being in history and being told as a student that our Māori knowledge are, he talks about unreliable myths. You know, yeah. Rangi Mātāmua talks about, he didn't have a problem with his science teachers, he had a problem going through school and he just couldn't see himself in the curriculum. Just that simple thing of not being able to see yourself in the curriculum. And so that is a shame that's unfairly and unjustly borne by us as Māori, and we need to remedy that. Number 4, noticing Māori absences was a hallmark of our study. We went into university studying knowing that we're probably not going to be taught by Māori, we're not going to see ourselves in the curriculum. And that's how we went through 20 years ago, 30 years ago. That shouldn't be happening today, but it still is. Number 5, the disciplines are not very welcoming of Māori. Yep. We're often lonely in academia. That was number 6. Number 7, but we can reimagine our disciplines. Crucial Watani, if you read her work, she's the philosopher. Oh, she's just the most amazing writer. And just really thinking in a really big way how we can transform our disciplines. And then number 8, we are really excited about the next generation, and we're seeing these incredible students, Māori students coming through, fluent and very comfortable in te reo, in their tikanga. And it's just normal that they are expecting, of course this is going to be part of their desire to learn about any discipline in Aotearoa New Zealand. Of course it should make also sense from a te ao Māori perspective. And so, you know, they will help us change, and that's for who we need to change the system for. So, kia ora.
Kia ora. I would just like to open the floor now for any pātai. He pātai, anyone? Kia ora. The microphone's on its way to you. If you could stand up, that'd be awesome.
Kia ora e te whānau, ko mamairo mere toa hauhuri tēnei no konei. I'm fortunate enough to have been a part of some of our Māori student associations at university, so Ngā Tauira Māori, Te Mana Akunga and Te Akatoki. And I'm fortunate enough to be doing my masters here at home. The one thing I noticed though is that there are so many of us that want to be a part of the academy, but we're struggling to get through our undergraduate degrees. And my pātai to you is, what advice would you have to tauira Māori that are you're trying to get to where you are and be as impactful for our iwi, but finding our place in these institutions is really quite a jarring and lonely experience, which you've touched on. So just any advice from you guys for that? Kia ora.
Well, I think what you're doing is already the first step, hanging out with the others in the Māori Students Association. And kia ora, I was in Ngaitauira and Te Manakunga also.
And I was in Te Akatoke. Kia ora.
So I think having buddies is good. Also remembering that some of those doors with your hapu and iwi will open once you've got your degree. So, you know, but it's we see that with all our students, it's so hard juggling jobs, responsibilities, with fees so high and all the other pressures. So stay in contact with your Māori staff and academics that are there, and your other Māori students, I think, is a good start. And then just hold off on some of those hapu and iwi obligations until you've got the degree, would be my advice.
And just really encourage you to do the writing and the research that really makes sense to you and to you as a whānau. And so for me, coming into law, and I don't know if anyone here's trained in law, you know, it's all about the law is, you know, it's neutral, that, you know, it's a whole lot of myths and sort of in this writing of law, and it's a very legal way of writing. It's very dry. And then there was this, and as I was coming through, there was this Indigenous scholar over in Canada, and he was writing about his dreams. He's a law professor. He was writing about his dreams and how those dreams mattered to him and his understanding of law. And this work was being published in a law journal. You know, it just opened my whole mind and thought, I can write like that. I can bring my own voice to my research and whatever that. So just be really strong and hang in there and stay in there. And we are fighting really hard right now to change up the system in the tertiary sector. And it's our fight that we have to take and to keep on in there to ensure that they do open the pathways for you. We need you in there. It is an amazing place. Look, the job of being an academic, you know, it's all this, you know, the institutional struggle can be horrendous and really, but if you find your mates and if you get we've got our collegiality as Māori academics at the University of Otago. You know, you find all the lonely onlys and you connect yourself all up, and then you connect yourself all up nationally. And there's Ngā Kete Mātauranga, you know, there's an incredible Māori research organisation that's going to welcome you as soon as you get into those postgraduate degrees. You're going to be linked up with Māori postgraduates across the whole country. And then it happens internationally. And then you get to go, you know, you have this most incredible career of being inspired and surrounding yourself with the most incredible Indigenous scholars from here and around the world. So it is very exciting. You know, there's a lot of privilege in being in academia. So while I might moan about it a lot, it is an amazing job. You know, and you can. Where's Simon? Simon's here somewhere still, isn't he? Yeah. You can put poetry into your course materials in law, and you know, that can change people's lives.
Kia ora.
If you choose the right poetry and stories.
And I would just like to answer and mihi to you for your question as a PhD student. It's really hard, and definitely mates, but also great chocolate and lots of late night eating of kai and some unexpected socialising and drinking is really important. You know, find your heroes. That's what I had to do, actually. Like, I left and went back many times, but I had to find people that I considered to be people I wanted to aspire to be like, or to achieve something that they'd achieved, and hold on for dear life to them, because I felt really isolated when I was in my undergrad degree. And in fact, in my first education lecture, I started off in law, failed. Education, succeeded, didn't like it. Went to literature, but in my first education lecture, the lecturer opened with, if you're Maori or a female and come from a working class or poor background, you won't be in this room. And that's how my university education opened. So, you know, stay, hold on, find heroes, don't listen to shitty lecturers. Kia ora. Any other pātai? Ngā Kete Mātauranga, now's your chance. Ask all the questions you want.
Kia ora. I just want to respond to the issue about our iwi investment in our rangatahi and the scholarships program, because I don't think that they should get off that easy, myself personally. And it's sad, and Rangitahi and I, we were at university together. I'm hearing the same thing I heard from Mere Mere Penfold back in the day. I think, so I just like to think that there's more structural conversations happening at the iwi leadership level between our Māori academia to get that kind of much more, what's it called, and I'm mihi to the iwi, of course, who made the investment in our kaupapa today, because that's tino rawi, because that's not a common practice unless you're in an industry that's generating direct economic benefit to our people. So I do appreciate, we do need Māori academia to be able to do that, but I really believe that we need to get those things. I like to see that you guys are thinking about how to structure that conversation so that they do see the value of a much more formal investment in that space.
Kia ora. It's a whole societal issue. If we're not graduating any of our students, including Māori, but if we're not graduating any of our students from degrees that have any understanding of Te Ao Māori, we're not preparing them for the modern Aotearoa New Zealand workforce. You know, I was meeting with the Minister, Chris Hipkins, Minister of Education last year, and it just happened to be a Vic graduation day, and he was all very proud of, there's everyone out there, graduating, in their gowns and everything. And, we said to him, that probably every single one of them have probably never had a Māori lecturer in their whole time at university, unless maybe they've taken Māori studies. But, we're talking about like the 111 is really powerful. We'd love iwi leaders' support, any other support that can help make this, just make these arguments known to institutional leaders. We often get put into the camp, there's a lot of women who are Māori women in tertiary sector, and often we're getting categorised as, just moaning, whining, angry Māori woman, so sometimes it's been really hard to push back, but we're still there. And this book is trying to do many, many different things, but first and foremost, it's a celebration of who we are as Māori, and this is only a glimpse into 24 amazing Māori superstars who are doing incredible things, and there's, so many more.
I'll just say that at Vic there is a Rawinia Higgins, our Deputy Vice-Chancellor Mauri, has an arrangement where she's trying to encourage iwi to provide money for scholarships, and then the university co-invests. So that's an arrangement that she's been championing. So that's something we have at Victoria University of Wellington. I can't remember off the top of my head how many there are, but I know there are lots of little iwi that have put in as much as they can, whether that's 5,000 or whatever, to then be co-funded by the university to try and encourage their own people to come through. So that's a start.
And I also know that many hapu and iwis provide funds for their students to go, and even though I didn't go in that way, even though I went to university and left and went to university and left, so I probably wouldn't have been a good investment anyway, but my brother did, and it makes a huge difference. And I think it's a massive and important investment for hapu and iwi, because I think that our whānau come back and they do the mahi there. That seems to have been what I've seen over and over again.
I guess the other way of looking at it is something I've tried to do is double up some of my obligations for my hapu here, Ngāti Kia, Ngāti Tuara, and the predator-free project that we have for Rotorua, and try and do some of that work as part of my university work and ensure that I've got some funding from within the university to hire research assistants or to share some of that money that we receive with the rūnanga. So there's a kind of, again, just looking at ways to ensure there's co-funding through to the hapu and iwi for the projects that they're working on and their aspirations. So that's, from the kind of Māori academic side, something that we can try and navigate. We also have an iwi internship program, which again is, the whole purpose of it is to try and get really talented students to do written projects for iwi that they want done but may not have someone available to write up. And so those are sort of, again, perhaps like Becky was saying, down in the detail of some of these things, of trying to ensure that some of the resourcing channels through to whānau hapu iwi aspirations, as well as just other, academic type priorities.
And I would also just like to add, like, quite a few of the students that I have supported as and tutored and so forth. One of the things that I found that I wanted to really be able to say to them as Māori is that, because there are not so many of us in the academy, in the institutions, we're at the vanguard. You take the risks. You have to go and do the mahi, like step up. If you can't find people there, you can create that. You can create that space. And I think that the academics who are in Ngā Kete Mātauranga and the waves of those who have come before, that's what they've done. They've created space and open space, and each successive generation that's come through has been able to open a bit more. I won't bemoan the fact that we can't just kick the door down, but that's something we can do, is continue to try and open the space, and don't wait for someone else to open it for you. I'm sorry, we don't have time for any more questions, because what we do have is a fantastic giveaway scenario of 3 wonderful books if you put your little ticket in at the beginning, and I'm going to hand to Jacinta, and she is going to tell us about that.
Yeah, so Jeanette Wekaira and Jacinta Beckwith are just coming forward. I don't know if there's the beautiful Te Takarangi panels at the back there, and it's a celebration as a sample of 150 incredible non-fiction writing by Māori, and just really as a way to really emphasise and to celebrate Māori non-fiction writing. 200 years, and we need more of Māori non-fiction writing. So in terms of writing our stories, there's so much inspiration in there through a... Oh, do you want to go by the podium, and then you'll be able to read out the names and see you. So we've had funding from Ngā Kete Mātauranga and the Royal Society Te Aparangi to establish this project. It's been running for a couple of years now. We've done many different things. And then last year we were able to partner with Te Ropu Whakahau and work with, it's a collaboration between libraries and marae around the country to again really celebrate Mātauranga Māori, Māori scholarship, Māori writing in a non-fiction way. And I'll pass, and as part of this, we're just thankful that we've been able to be here in this amazing library here. We have been up on the 2nd floor and just really, where's some of the librarians from here, Rangatihi, just really marvelling at the resources here in this library and thinking, we were just wishing that our university librarian could come and spend some time here and learn how you care and enable access to Māori resources. The 2nd floor up there is incredible, the whole library is. So just really to acknowledge that. Jeanette and Jacinta.
So we have had a box out the front of by the Te Takarangi exhibition where people have been able to put in, not working, talk into the mic, sorry, where people have been able to put in their names to go into a drawer to win a bag of books. So I'm just going to draw those out. It's going to be...
Who can do drum rolls?
So, do we do redraws?
I think there's just 3 names that are going to be drawn, and there's 1 book each for the general public who have been...
like, highlighter. And I can't
You draw the 2nd one, we'll have a look.
Do you know what that says?
Janine van der Beek.
And if they're not here today, we'll make sure it gets to them.
Okay, and the 2nd one is Leon Andrews.
Leon, are you here? Someone who wants to pretend they're Leon?
Jacinta, do you want to maybe show the books that we're giving away, the 3 books that are as the gifts?
That's right. Come on up, Leon.
So it's Tangata Whenua is one of the gift books.
Leon is my middle name as well.
We have a Te Takarangi little notebook, and this is our Te Takarangi catalogue of 150 books. And then the last one is...
Yeah, me too, I'm Leon.
They can fight over who gets what bag.
And then
Can we?
Rangi's Matariki book.
Okay. I just got instructions to keep drawing until at least one person who's sitting here gets the prize. Okay?
Go on, shall we?
Okay. So the next person I've drawn is her name is, or his name, Kim Pears.
Kim, come on up.
Redraw.
Yeah, one more, let's go. Lucky dip. Just say who you are.
EJ McPherson.
Have people been entering today? Did you
EJ!
I don't think people here have been entering into the box.
Did anyone in this room enter into this? Oh, yeah, kia ora, what's your name?
I think there needs to be a bit more of a momentum of, anyway.
We might get
This
your
has
name.
been running
We'll try one
throughout
more.
the whole week for general
Abby.
public.
Abby! Woohoo!
I don't actually know if it's Abby, but is it Abby? Oh, come on.
Okay. Yeah, come up. Which one do you want? You choose.
Oh, yay! You choose Abby.
And just as Abby's choosing, we also have just a gift to the library of 17 of these beautiful books from Te Takarangi, and we'll give those to the library at some point.
And thank you to the
Kia
library.
ora.
Nō reira, tēnei taku mihi kia kōrua mō tō kōrero mai kia mātou. Thank you so much for today, and I'm sure if you have any further questions, these two will be somewhere in the audience and we can find them. Please put your hands together one more time. Kia ora.
Tēnā koutou, wahine mā. Tō waimare hoki Abby. Tō waimare hoki.